Let's do this one more time. The new Spider-Man movie just came out, and it's already being praised as a masterpiece, an evolutionary step for the human race, and the best Spider-Man movie ever made for the 6th time. Into the Spider-Verse revolutionized animated movies by reminding everyone that cartoons don't need to look soulless and devoid of creativity, basically flexing that they made a visual masterpiece, deservedly won an Oscar, and most importantly to any corporation, they made a shit ton of money. We're talking about knack 2 levels of success here, but did it surpass the first film? Yes, but also no. This movie is a step ahead of the first one in almost every single way. The visuals are crazier than they've ever been. The composition and framing of every scene just feels so wild. The characters are more fleshed out and have more to do than just act as Miles' supporting cast. The villains succeed in being personal threats to Miles, and not just some universe-ending threat. And thankfully, they removed all hints of Lil Wayne from the soundtrack.
I'm not scared of the dark.
While every other studio was catching up to where they were 5 years ago, they were like, nah, I don't think so. Raising the bar again and blowing everything they did out of the park. It's more of an evolution than a revolution. They honed on what feels like 2 specific aspects. 1, how can we incorporate even more artistic mediums? And 2, how do we show Miles' story about being more than just a Spider-Man clone? This film takes all the creative juices flowing in the first film's art style and squeezes every last bit out of it. No longer are just the characters stylized, but so is every other universe they fly across. Mumbattan being inspired by the Indian Indra Hall comics with its loose lining and vibrant hues of color. Nuva York taking inspiration from NASA and Sid Mead's work, often use large blocks of colors and shapes over lines or details, while Universe 42 has this wet ink look to it with a messy pen hatching to convey this bleak grunge style. Once again, using art direction and animation not just as a set dressing, but a way to convey the story. But I think Gwen's universe is the standout location, acting like a visual mood ring. The environment morphs and changes to visually represent what the vibe we should be feeling is. I've never felt so bad for blind people until I watched these movies. The hip-hop music, which was a big part of the last movie, is still here, but it's toned down a bit. You don't get that jaw-dropping moment of hearing a Biggie Smalls song on an animated movie, where he starts spitting this lyrical web that perfectly captures Miles' persona that he puts around his uncle as this tough, streetwise kid who's more into bitches and sneakers than he is running on the playground. But at the same time, you thankfully don't get something like Lil Wayne's nasally voice distracting you from the actual scene. Instead, they tone down the rap for specific set scenes and increase each character's leitmotif. A pretty good trade, as now each character can be easily recognizable with their own sound. Whoever they hired as the cameraman needs a raise, because he didn't need to go this hard. Having good visuals is only the first step. Knowing how to frame, edit, and transition goes such a long way. Every shot is so well timed that these 2 hours felt like they could have been 2 minutes. Your life will pass through your very eyes and you still won't be able to look away from the screen. For a film being more than 2 hours long, my biggest complaint is that it actually feels too short. The theater I was in audibly booed when the movie ended. I get why they removed the part 1 on the film title so that audiences wouldn't think it's just half a movie, but I definitely think that would have leveled people's expectations regarding how it ends. Honestly, if the biggest complaint is that I wish this 2-hour movie was a 4-hour movie, it's definitely a good problem to have. This next step in Miles' story explored how he's accepted the responsibility entrusted onto him both as Spider-Man and as a person. Evolving from a kid who'd run away in the first film into a man who's trying to do right by everyone no matter how many times he's gonna get knocked down. The main characters all have issues regarding their family, identity, and responsibility. So let's start with Gwen. Gwen, in terms of character, has had the biggest glow up from the last movie. Into the Spider-Verse is an amazing film. But still, I have a tiny amount of nitpicks that bother me slightly on rewatch, and they sadly mostly revolve around Gwen. Like, why does Gwen time travel a week prior after the Collider explosion, when every other multiverse Spider-Man is brought to the immediate present? Why is Gwen in her universe watercolor style, but in Miles' universe she matches his world's aesthetic? How is Gwen alive after a week of glitching when it's implied that everyone else has been there for 2 days and can barely exist? How does Gwen enter Miles' school with no prior school history? None of these on their own is really that big of a deal, but altogether it's obvious that they just wanted Gwen and Miles to interact early on, but also have Gwen not be immediately recognized as a Spider-Man variant. There just wasn't a narratively satisfying way to do it, so they just threw her in there. But this time around, Gwen has a much more important role. I'd say she's basically the co-star of the movie. As the film opens up with her and her struggles, it's clear that she's essentially been mentally cut. She's lived the heights of the shonen lifestyle, that as long as she has friends, nothing can stop her. But if she can't even keep a steady friendship, how can she keep a dad around? Her Avril Lavigne teen angst is juxtaposed with a visual delight for the eyes. Robbie Rodriguez's vision is brought to life with such ease, you'd think this animation style was the norm. The way the backgrounds meld with the emotions of the scenes is such a fun way to show us Gwen's state of mind. It allows the editing to be seamless with the composition direction. Scenes will weave from one to another, days turn into nights in the blink of an eye. The maximalism style is already in full swing, yet it's never hard to follow or read. Apparently, blowing a Kirby crackle through the space-time continuum had a negative side effect, such as allowing this Vitruvian-style Falcon to traverse to Gwen's universe. 5 minutes in, and these guys are flexing their creative muscles, creating this Da Vinci-style aesthetic where he's mainly made of line work and badly cut out parchment paper. And whenever his mech gears up for an attack, notes are quickly jotted across the screen. And this guy is just here for this opening. All the effort for this one character who's dealt with in the prologue. They keep up this artistic variation for all the different multiversal characters too. That's where Spider-Man 2099 comes in. He's the embodiment of a scorned fan who nitpicks at the flaws in the plot and aims to keep the canon the same for eternity. You can first see this idea being weaved in by the writers when the helicopter lights flash him and he gets stun locked because he's been stuck in his mom's basement since the last film's release, complaining, and this is most likely his first exposure to any source of light. His art style looks to be more Chiaroscuro inspired as he's covered in strong shadows throughout. He's so annoyed that Miles is Spider-Man that he's trying to get the whole Spider-Verse to gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss him away. Let's jump to the next pair, Spot and Miles. Spot is essentially the love child of Bean from Community, the Greendale human being, and a Dalmatian. Just like a modern day Idubbbz fan, Spot is unable to take responsibility for his own actions, blaming someone else for leading him down this alternative pipeline. This guy had everything taken away from him. His girl, his job, his dignity, his bagel. Hell, if you look close enough, you'll notice that his skin is gone too. So much so that the understructure of his character design can be seen poking through. Literally, a shell of his former self. They do this balancing act of villainizing this goofball, but never making him seem unreasonable. He simply wants revenge on Miles for what he blames is his fault. He goes out of his way to avoid hurting others. His only goal is to hurt Miles himself. He doesn't want to take responsibility that he was working for Kingpin, that he helped build the collider, and that he chose to be there when it exploded. And then take Miles on the other hand. He's on the other side of the spectrum, where he takes up too much responsibility. When his parents try to get him to open up, he shuts them out. When things go sideways at the Spider Station, he shuts off all opposing thoughts, even if they're trying to reason with him like Peter does. He hasn't found the right balance between a team member versus a sole leader. He still hasn't learned the lesson that Alfred was once trying to teach him. What's one man gonna do with all that power? Peter B is also here, but with a much smaller role. He's passed on the mantle of main character to Miles, so he doesn't need to take up that much screen time. He manned up and faced what even Spider-Man has had a hard time beating up: children. It seems like he top no jutsu his way back into his marriage. Honestly, they wrote these guys a little too well. They've opened up themselves for what every writer fears: bad reading comprehension. So I've been seeing this tweet make the rounds, basically claiming that Gwen Stacy is actually secretly a clown because her costume colors match the colors that a clown would wear. While multiple interpretations are good for discourse, interpreting the film so far from what it actually shows us comes off as bad media literacy. Even though this would make sense, as clowns are seen as fun, chaotic forces of nature, thus making her dad disapprove as a cop, he represents lameness and control. I get the sentiment that people want to see themselves in this character, but nothing in the movie ever explicitly states or hints that it's that. So it comes off as a projection of what you want this character to be, not what she actually is. They purposely wrote Gwen's argument with her father so broadly, exactly so that we can all connect with what she's saying, even if it wasn't specifically aimed at you. On the other side of the spectrum, we see people complaining that Peter B. Parker isn't manly enough because he's taking care of his daughter, wears a bathrobe, and has lost all his riz. Okay, let's start with a weird bathrobe nitpick. He went from wearing sweatpants to a bathrobe, showing that while he still likes to be comfortable, he's less of a slob and is more of a functioning slob. He brings Mayday with him as he trusts that she'll be safe because he's not afraid that she'll slow him down. Peter B is the only voice of reason between all the other Spider-Men out there. He has grown from a character who avoids responsibility to both raising a child and doing his best to protect Miles. He's the only one that was able to reach out to him, even for a second. It's crazy to think that this Peter is any less of a man, because what's more manly than being a good father? I think it's fine that people can misread the writing to fit whatever personal beliefs they have, because I think it's also fine to laugh at it. This movie does so much right, it's hard to complain about the one thing that it doesn't stick the landing on. Infinity War proved that these two-parter movies can be satisfying on their own and not just as a pair. The movie should have wrapped some of the things that it set up before jumping into the next film. Hell, the last location Milo goes to, we're introduced to even more characters. Though I am willing to eat shit on this if the next movie is another banger, but that's also the thing. If the next movie somehow doesn't live up to this insane quality, the ending of this one will sting even more. So, no pressure, Sony. Just make another banger, or the internet will never let you live it down. Subscribe. My ego depends on it.